Hi, I'm Joshua Hatcher, and I'm a lecturer here at JMI, and I also direct the JMI Jazz Orchestra. Today we're going to have a look at the geography of the big band and some of the concepts that will allow you to understand the decision-making processes behind how the instruments in the band are configured in a performance space. Additionally, down below in the description, we're going to provide a little bit of historical context of the evolution of the instrumentation of the big band, so you can see how we've arrived at the conventional instrumentation we have today of the 5 saxophones, the 4 trombones, 4 trumpets, and a 4-piece rhythm section with drums, bass, piano, and guitar. We've seen that there is an evolution of the lineup of the band in terms of instrumentation, and we've arrived at what would be broadly considered as a standard instrumentation of the modern big band, with the 3 lines of horns, a saxophone section, a trombone section, and a trumpet section, and the rhythm section bridging down the side of that, the 3 lines of horns there. One of the most important kind of interesting ways that that's organized is there's the choice for why the rhythm section would be on one side of the band or the other. We can see from grand piano that it's not a symmetrical instrument. There's a lid that opens on the piano, and that projects sound in a certain direction. And so the reason why the rhythm section is conventionally positioned on stage right is because the lid opens and projects sound towards the horn section of the band, which allows for acoustic balancing on stage. We want to avoid sound reinforcement as much as possible, and that allows for the acoustic volume and projection of the grand piano to be optimized. Subsequently, we then have the rhythm section positioned as close as possible together to facilitate visual communication, and again, so that they can hear one another really clearly and work together as a unit. The next thing that's important about the organization of the 3 lines of horns is the positioning of the lead players in the center of each of the sections of the horn section. So that has benefits to the band and the sections, both within each section and communicating between sections. So the benefit of having the lead player positioned at the center of a section is that that player is best heard in terms of their sound and best seen, and it's easier for that lead player to communicate with the other players in the section from the center. They can just look down either side if anything needs to be said, and the other players can see any visual cues. For example, in the absence of a director, often a lead alto player might be the one that actually has to use their instrument to perform certain cues, like cutting the band off at the end of a chart or something like that. So in the center of the section, that's best where the cue is best seen and the player is best heard. There are benefits between sections as well. So by having the lead players or the lead trumpet positioned at the back of the band in the center, and then the lead trombone in front of them, and then the lead alto in front of them, it makes it possible for the phrasing of the band to be easily managed between sections so that everyone can play. Another important aspect of the organization of the horn section and the position of players within that section will be having the principal soloists, which is typically going to be your second trumpet, your second trombone, and your first tenor. The principal soloists of each section on the end of the section that is closest to the rhythm section. That allows those instruments to operate as effectively a small band within the big band for portions of a chart where there might be an extended solo section. And then as horn figures are added to that, that small band evolves back to a big band, but that allows those soloists to feel physical proximity and also to clearly hear what's going on and communicate both musically and visually with the rhythm section due to them being positioned beside the rhythm section. We've looked at some reasons why the horns are organized in the way that they are in a conventional big band lineup. But let's look a little more closely at the organization of the rhythm section and some of the spatial relationships that might be helpful for you to set up your band. I think in terms of the positioning of the rhythm section beside the horns, the most important thing to do to start setting the rhythm section up and build around that is making sure that your drummer is sitting no further back, as in where their stool is in the drum kit, that where they're sitting is no further back than in line with the trumpet section. Particularly brass instruments are incredibly directional, and if you've got your drummer sitting behind the alignment of the brass, they're going to have a really hard time conceptualizing the actual relative dynamic level that the band is playing at. And you're probably going to find that they're either constantly playing too loud, or you're telling them just to play so quietly all the time that they're playing with no intensity and they're playing too quietly. The best way to empower your drummer to get them making intuitive, dynamic decisions is allowing them to hear the band properly. So make sure that the drummer is sitting no further back than in the alignment of the trumpet section. Moving forwards from there, another good guideline will be to say, get the bass player roughly in alignment with the trombone section. Depending on if you have a grand piano or if you're using a keyboard with your band, the exact position and alignment of where the bass player is might differ a little bit. Many bands will set up the bass actually in the nook of the piano. This allows the bassist to really get great sense of pitch accuracy and get some sympathetic resonance from the bass bouncing off the lid of the piano as well. If you've got a keyboard, you don't necessarily have that consideration, and obviously a keyboard doesn't have a nook. So a keyboard would allow you to position rather than with the player facing the front of the stage, looking directly at an audience. It might be more constructive, both for visual communication and also just for the player to feel like they're really in the band and not just looking away. To have the keyboard set up actually perpendicular to the orientation of the stage, where the keys player is actually facing the side of the band, looking back towards the rest of the band, looking directly towards the horn section. That would be particularly important, seeing as often that instrument is positioned the furthest to the stage right, away from the band. So if you're a director, that will help you with visual communication with your keyboard player, if they're playing keyboard. Then moving forwards, the guitar, a great position for that in terms of alignment, we'll be thinking about the guitar roughly aligning with the saxophone section. In that way, then you've got the rhythm section operating down the side of the band on stage right, and the piano sort of framing the edge of where that rhythm section is, whether it's a grand piano or a keyboard. One final consideration for the positioning of the drums, definitely not behind the trumpets, would be the fact that often trumpet players are going to be standing when they play, or they'll be on riser. And if you position your drum kit behind the horn section, as is often requested by engineers when we're performing live, it's a very common occurrence that they want to set up the drum kit in the center of the stage, at the back of the stage, more like a conventional positioning where it might be for a rock band. If you're directing from in front of the band, you will immediately lose any ability to communicate with the drummer because they're going to be seated, and then you're going to have trumpet players standing in front of them. And you should not have to be ducking and weaving to try to catch the drummer's eye during the performance. Now on to some considerations for directing your horn players in the horn section. As I said before, brass instruments are incredibly directional. This is not only important for the members of the band to be aware of so that they can hear one another within the band, but also in terms of helping your musicians get their sound out the front to the audience that you're playing for. So particularly for a young band, brass instruments are quite heavy relative to, for example, a school student's body size and strength, particularly for a junior player that might still be in primary school. And they'll often, for example, a trumpet player will very easily have their trumpet with the bell basically down between their knees playing straight into the floor, or they may have it up a little higher, but because they're looking and reading music, the instrument is played straight into the stand. Now, that causes several problems. It cuts the actual dynamic projection of the band substantially, meaning that to achieve a forte in the ensemble, you're having to really push your players to really force their instruments and play hard to get a loud sound out of the band, a loud dynamic. And that creates a knock-on effect where not only are they having to work harder, so they will fatigue more quickly, creating just stamina issues, particularly for young players, as well as intonation issues for any player at any stage of their career. That'll create stamina issues, particularly for young musicians, and also intonation issues as players get tired. At any stage of their career, intonation is going to become an issue. That consideration for trumpets also obviously applies for trombones. The trombones are already thinking about this a little bit though, because they've got slides. So they're already thinking a little bit about where the instrument needs to be in relation to their music stand. However, make sure that you also get them thinking about beyond their slide. They need to think about where their bell is positioned. So they might have to get used to playing off to the side rather than underneath the stand, which many young players are doing, again, just because of the weight of the instrument. They're still building up comfort with holding their instrument in its appropriate playing position. The more that we are pushing wind instruments that are acoustic instruments to play at the very edge of their dynamic capacity, the more we're going to hear a distortion of tone. So essentially, you're going to end up with, for example, a trumpet section that sounds really, for want of a better term, blatty, like that blasty sort of tone. And if you've worked with a young band before, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So the best way to overcome that is to allow your young musicians to optimize the efficiency of the sound production by getting their bell either to the side of the stand, or depending on how they set up, it may be possible to lower the music stand and play over the top. That could be a little bit problematic in terms of positioning. So I think to the side is a more standard approach, and that's what I've seen the trumpet players that I work with use as their primary strategy. This will allow the sound to get out the front. It means players are putting in less energy into their instruments to achieve the same dynamic with a more beautiful sound, and they'll be able to get through a rehearsal without being completely chopped and be able to get through a performance, and you might have a climactic moment of a chart that the band really loves playing, and there's no bigger letdown when the lead trumpet player is so tired from having to fight their way through the sound of the band for a whole gig to then not be able to hit an important climactic note in an ensemble passage in the last tune of your performance. So the more you can encourage your players to find those efficiencies and get used to speaking through their instruments at a conversational volume as opposed to forcing their instruments, you'll find you'll find success there. So another common challenge faced by developing bands is not having the same number of players matching up with the same number of parts. This could manifest several different ways. It could be that you have 7 saxophones there to play 5 parts, or it could be that you only have 1 or 2 trombones there to play the 4 trombone parts. Both of those challenges are not insurmountable. You just have to sort of find ways to work around them. At a certain point, it might be helpful. For example, let's say you have in your band 10 saxophones. At a certain point, it might be helpful that you actually, in the interest of keeping musicians close together, even move some of your saxophones back into a second line. Let's just say, for example, your band is 3 trumpets, 1 trombone, and 10 saxophones. In that instance there, it might actually make more sense to either move your baritone and some of your second tenors into the second line with the trombones and bring all the horns closer together so we don't end up with a ginormous stretched out line of saxophones, making it almost impossible to hear the lead player in the center for those players that are on the peripheries of the section. Another situation that could occur is that you have, let's say you have 5 saxophones, but yeah, you only have 2 trumpets and 2 trombones. It would be quite logical there, I think, to have the 4 brass playing in one line together. And in that instance, I would suggest that you would put your lead trumpet and your lead trombone side by side, again in the middle of the section, and then you have the 2 other trumpets, so second trumpet and second trombone on the sides of the section. One final consideration would be that often, because of interest in the band, there might be additional percussionists that might be playing with a band. Sometimes this is due to the repertoire requiring percussion. Sometimes it's just because it's about trying to get as many musicians engaging with the band as possible, and because there's only one drum chair, we've got to find other ways for the percussionists or the drummers to be involved. In terms of where you would position the various percussion instruments, such as congas or timbale, or other hand percussion instruments such as tambourines or cowbells or shakers or clave, getting the position of the percussionist as close to the drummer as possible would be my recommendation. This allows the drummer and the percussionist or percussionists to be able to sort of negotiate their parts together. Sometimes they might need to actually, in a rehearsal, discuss what they're going to do in a given passage. Otherwise, just to maintain the sightline communication between them and have them as close together as possible so they can hear exactly and also see exactly what one another is doing. That can be really helpful. Additionally, in some charts, the vibraphone is called for. That creates another quite large instrument to stage in the band. And I would suggest trying to get the vibes probably as close to the piano as possible. If you are using a keyboard and the keyboard is oriented perpendicular to the front of the stage, you could put the vibes beside the keys in a similar alignment, facing across the stage, facing directly towards the horn section. That allows the keyboard player and the vibraphone player to communicate with one another. Again, sometimes things have to be discussed. That facilitates a quick and quiet conversation where you don't have players shouting across half the band to figure out what they're going to do, as well as the fact that they might even have some passages where they're playing as a section, effectively playing unisons together. So that allows them to be able to phrase more similarly if they can see and hear each other clearly.